welcome. We are learning in the book of Sedot, Revelation chapter 7, about the 144,000. They're also mentioned here in Revelation 14. So something to note right away is that 7 means completion. And so this can represent like a candlestick. And so Judah, with its 12 tribes, is like a candlestick, and Ephraim, with it even has 12 tribes, is like this other candlestick, and they become one. So we're going to look into this further as far as who is the firstborn, who are the firstfruits. Something to also note in this chapter is that when Edom falls, then Jacob rises. Only one serves the other. So Edom can be over Jacob, or Jacob can be over Edom, depending on who's strong at the moment, who's serving God. So I know we're talking about Babylon being Jerusalem. So Edom is not just Christianity or Rome. So it goes back to this spirit of being connected with Satan. So the first one that gets connected with Satan being Adam, this sevenfold spirit that kind of gets into the seed of man, corrupting them. So we know that Esau comes from this ancient spirit that was already around. And so just like with Esau, his head is chopped off and falls in there with the tomb of Abraham. That's the tradition there. When they were coming to try to bury Jacob, Esau tried to prevent them, saying that that was his burial plot. And so his head actually gets buried there and his body later. And that's understood to apply to Christianity, where the head of Christianity gets saved and then the body is just like elsewhere. So look at this. So we're going to start with firstborn instead of first fruits. So firstborn seems to be very broad, starting with Adam, and it gets narrower and narrower until we get to Messiah. So then only Messiah being the firstborn Son of God, and then we'll look at who are the first fruits. So Adam is called the Son of God. So we have this idea already in Torah that even if you have other sons, you only have one son that gets the inheritance. So to Adam was given everything, but also we learn that to Messiah, everything is given. So Adam must have lost that, and Messiah is like the second Adam. So even if God has many sons, like he had the angels called the sons of God, at this time, the one that is adopted to be his son is called Adam, just like Abraham had another son, Ishmael, but Isaac is called his only son. So then in Exodus, Israel is called the firstborn son. So now we've narrowed this down to Israel. He's wrestled with God and prevailed. He's a prince of God. So not just all humanity, now just Israel is the firstborn son of God. And then now he's adopting Solomon to be his son. And so then we understand that Messiah comes from Solomon. And Messiah is called, this seems to only be applying here to Messiah, the uses of this word here that mean firstborn. So maybe Mary had other sons, but even if she only had one son, this is her firstborn son. If she had more children later, it's wondered whether those other ones like James are only from the father, like Joseph, like he could have been a lot older, or she could have had other children later, even though that might be offensive. So I leave that open for that. And then firstborn among brethren, this he, I think, is singular, referring to Messiah, or you could say that he's talking about individuals, that everyone he's foreknowing, you need to go out and get many more brothers. So he's joined with but usually this is capitalized. I think the understanding here is that Messiah is the firstborn among many brothers. So there's one body, right? But Messiah is the head because he's the firstborn from the dead. So sometimes it could depend on how you're using the context. But it seems like in all of these verses, it is only referring to Messiah. So I think we should safely say that only Messiah is the firstborn. Like if you're talking about the firstborn of all creation, it's Messiah, the firstborn from the dead. So I think for here, like the Bereshit, even if others are referred to as firstborn, they need to be replaced because they fell. There's only one firstborn. Just like Reuben, he could have been called the firstborn, but then that right goes just to Messiah, that he's the only firstborn, the only first for absolutely everything. In everything, he has to have the preeminence. So I think for Messiah, we need to go with all these verses are just referring to Messiah. There's not too many of them. So he's the head of the body. He is the firstborn from the dead. So all things, he needs to have the preeminence. He's the beginning of absolutely everything. So if we look at Nimrod, that he has a beginning, no. He replaced Nimrod. Nimrod fell. Everybody else falls. So Messiah is the only true source that everything goes through. So if we look at these 104,000, how are they redeemed? Everything having to go through Messiah. There can be no other source. There can be no other way. So when he brings the firstborn into the world, let all the angels of God worship him. So this points us back to Adam, because the story is that he told the angels to worship Adam, but they didn't want to. So it shows that Adam was supposed to be like this Messiah figure, to have authority over the world, but that he fell. And so what we see with Golgotha is I even have this theory that this is the skull of Adam. There's things like, I don't know if it was 300 ells, like a massive height that Adam could be. So it's hard for people to believe. So they downtone and be like, oh, it can't be that much. But I have an open mind. So I like to think that this is Adam's skull. And so his blood ran down on Adam. He redeemed Adam in the year like 5,500, if that was true to the prophecy. So like the books of Adam and Eve talk about this, and they also talk about how Adam was buried in a cave. So this could have been a massive cave, but it also, if his body is missing, it also kind of points to only the head of humanity is saved, the head of Adam, the head of Edom. So here's our final three verses here, talking about the firstborn of Egypt, in Israel, with Israel, the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. So the assembly is not the firstborn. It seems like they're belonging to the firstborn. So here you see that this of is not something that's added. Things like this are added for clarification. To the church of the firstborn, it seems like they're belonging to the firstborn. I also wanted to note here that they're not as first fruits. This word is actually added according to here, redeemed. They are first fruits. They're not like first fruits. They're not compared to first fruits. They are first fruits. So the assembly of the firstborn, I don't think it's like of the title of the firstborn, like all this assembly is the firstborn. I think they are belonging to the firstborn, to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect. And then Yeshua Mashiach is called the firstborn of the dead. Now, he does freely share all things with us. So once all is one and he gives everything back to the Father, then in this regard, it's not about position, like who's the greatest. So we're not arguing about who's the greatest, but we should acknowledge that we need to remain in Messiah, not ever think that we're doing anything in our own. So he's the only one worthy for all the credit to go through everything, to go through him, because he's the only one who is able to give all the glory back to the Father. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings, like they show so much resilience for being able to hold on to the ring. Like other people, they hold on to the ring, like mankind, they'll just fall. So like, I don't know if it's a poor comparison, but he is the only one who doesn't get like tainted, affected, and is able to like destroy evil. So now in regard to Nimrod, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the source, God created. So this same word, beginning, is used to describe Nimrod, like an antichrist figure, the Hamites. So this is kind of also what he gives in the place of Israel, that he says that he gives, I gave Egypt for your ransom, Cush and Seba in your place. So we'll look at how this is somehow missing. So having destroyed all principalities, all powers, all the principal ones, he's made a show on them, because all these other ones that seem to have a beginning, like they maybe claim it of their own, they are cast down, they fall, so they get destroyed. Even Ham might have been beginning, but then his son gets Canaanite, gets cursed in his place. So these beginnings don't really last. And also Reuben was kind of like the beginning. So let's take a look. The beginning, the actual physical firstborn. So when we look at these, what we see is Ephraim is missing. So in regard to Joseph, it said that any children born to you after them shall be yours, and they shall be called by the names of their brothers. So we don't have any record of Joseph having any other children, except he does bring up children on his knees. So it's the same kind of wording of how Manasseh and Ephraim are brought to Jacob's knees. So it could be like a kind of like they're coming from him. So Joseph, there's actually a total of 14 tribes, which also kind of brings us back to this 14. So here it's Judah and all the tribes who are associated with him that are one staff. And then we can go with Ephraim, who is missing here, and all the tribes that are associated with him as another staff. So we have these 2 sevens, which makes 14 tribes in all. So it's like before, Levi was not supposed to be counted among Israel, have an inheritance, but now we're seeing this. So it's almost like a promotion where these are the first fruits, the head, just like Levi was the first fruits, the ones that God takes for himself instead of the firstborn of all Israel, because the firstborns all sinned. So he took all the Levites for himself, but now he's saying he redeemed these. And since Levi is included, it's kind of like them being also called the firstborn sons, then this is kind of like these get a promotion to all being sort of Levi. Like I know among them, they can also have Levi, but if there's also Ephraim with all the tribes associated with him, as in people who were natural Israel who joined to Messiah before these 144,000 are sealed, that they also have 12 tribes associated with them. So they also have a Levi class. So this Judah's standard was to the east, and then Ephraim's standard is to the west. So it could be something like America. So all the way along the middle of the earth, we have Judah and Ephraim. And so Dan is also missing, and his standard is to the north. but Reuben is included here, so it's not like he has this separate thing. So Judah and Ephraim become one staff. This comes like all the center of the earth. But Dan only rules like one of the tribes of Israel. So it does Assyria, kind of like representing Dan class from the north, they're not like necessarily included, but the speculation is that the south might be completely destroyed. So when we look at Google Earth, there is said for the trumpets that a third of the earth is destroyed. So I don't think this is like, maybe it's hit and miss, like, a tree here, a tree there, or it could be because this abyss is open. We talked about this being the abyss, the third tooth down. If this is the abyss and it covers like a third of the earth, and the effect of this, it could be an explanation of why Reuben is not included. As far as all of this turns into a desert uninhabitable, it gets destroyed. And so him saying, so we can look at words for redeem, like, yes, Messiah, they go through Messiah, but also the wording of I give all this for your ransom, instead of like this abyss destroying everything around a third of the world all around here. It could be this abyss, just a speculation I'm throwing out, that destroys like all of this south. So then the south doesn't really exist anymore. So we have the north represented with Dan, Assyria, like the land of the north, not just specific Assyria. That was just symbolic. So when we say north, it could be much broader now. And then east with Ephraim and Jews having all, or east, this is east, and over here is west. So all of these three areas represented, but the south not really being represented. And so a speculation could be that a third of the earth is destroyed, and that's the southern area of the world. So how can Joseph be an individual tribe if his only children are also tribes? So he saw Ephraim's sons to the third generation. That's how long he lived. And indeed, the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up on Joseph's knees. And so Manasseh is divided into kind of like two half tribes, because half the tribe settles westward and then half the tribe eastward. So Manasseh kind of being split here, with the sons of Machir maybe now being the sons that are attributed to Joseph. So Machir would be the tribe of Joseph, technically speaking. So now let's look at first fruits. And right off the bat, we recognize that our works are not our own. This is coming from the Spirit. So because the Spirit is in us, we are producing fruit. We have the first fruits of the Spirit. So if we are called first fruits, then we understand that it's because of what we've produced. It's not, we haven't produced it, it's the Spirit, what has been produced in us. So now, here, the first fruit is not the Gentiles. He's talking about the casting away of natural-born Jews in order for nations to be grafted in, reconciled to God. So when these grafted out branches are received again, this could be life from the dead for everybody, for the nations. So the first fruit, we can tell what this is by comparing it. The root is holy, so are the branches. So the lump is the branches. Now, you could say that the root is like Messiah, but he's saying that you receive nourishment from the tree. You partake of the root and fatness of the olive tree. In context here, he's talking about Israel. So Christians shouldn't be telling Israel how to, interpret and say that they're just lying or whatever. They should be receiving from teachings, and you can understand that Messiah did correct some of those teachings, but you were receiving from the root, from the fatness of the olive tree definitely representing Israel. And this makes sense because it's not the entire tree cut down, all the branches grafted out. So there were those who were righteous. And Messiah even clarifies he's only sent to the lost, to the ones who are not righteous. He doesn't call the righteous ones to repentance. So first, he's trying to make the lump whole, those who are kind of cast out, not being dealt with properly. And then he will come for the righteous. So we see after all the final nations have come in, then these other branches are grafted in, and they are all virgins. They are all righteous. So even though they can be redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, like maybe that's how they're sealed ahead of time, and even also giving the South for their ransom, they are still described as being righteous, as being virgins. So how are they first fruits? Is that they have not yet become part of Messiah until they are sealed like this. So they're the first ones to come in from natural Judah. So as far as Ephraim then, who is not part of this 144,000, I would say it's all the tribes of Israel that are associated with Ephraim, because that's what it says when you look at that passage of the two staffs becoming one. So it's no longer like southern tribe versus northern tribe, just 10 and 2. It's we see for Judah, there's no Ephraim, so it's the Jews are all 12 tribes. They're underneath the standard of Judah in the east, right? So they're natural Jews, but they are also, none of them have come in as far as these righteous until the start of the day of Hashem, after the final one comes in to join the fold of Ephraim. And so any Jews that have been getting saved all along, probably, this is the way I understand it, is that they're joining this greater fold of Ephraim because they're being born from above. So the spiritual kind of supersedes the physical. So even though they are naturally circumcised, since they are also spiritually circumcised by accepting Messiah by faith like this, and out of need because they have this kind of sin or something, then they are part of this fold of Ephraim. So we've talked about how the first fruits, the first who are last, they were original, but they're also like the last to join, that this is definitely Judah and all the tribes associated with him, natural to the tree. But what about the nations, the staff of Ephraim? So we have this guy who is called the first fruits of Achaia, Achaia being Greece. And so he's talking maybe to Italy right next door, but also when he's talking to Corinthians, he's saying Stephanas is the first fruits of Achaia. So the first ones to join, the first ones to produce fruit, but it's not just Stephanas. We have Stephanas Fortunatus and Acacius. So specifically Stephanas, though, I don't know if maybe Epaenetus is of the house of Stephanas, but I think we can see represented is kind of like this Rome area, the sons of Yavan, which gets translated as Greece. But I don't know if they just settled there because this is that third kingdom. I keep wanting to say Japheth, and I keep forgetting Yavan. So that's where this is located. So we have, I think, Yavan, Rome, Christianity, Ephraim being represented as not just Messiah, the only one being able to be first fruits. We can see Judah, and then probably like Ephraim, because Paul deals with this fold of Ephraim that's coming in. Though technically, I think these Jews who are accepting Messiah here should also be Ephraim. So let's just finish these few verses. If now Christ is risen from the dead and become the first fruits. So Christ is the first fruits. We know he's probably only the firstborn. He's the first preeminence in everything. But so he's the firstborn from the dead, and he's the first fruits from the dead. So we take after this type of tree. This is like the sap that we are nourished from, that he nourishes this entire tree. He's the head of all Israel, and we're also grafted into this tree. Christ, the first fruits, and afterward those who are Christ at his coming. So in this context, Christ. So in this context, it's pointing to him fulfilling the first 4 holidays, one of them being the Feast of First Fruits, where he is presented to God, and then we partake of him, kind of becoming this body. You could say afterward, they who are Christ is coming are presented as first fruits, but like technically it's like that was already kind of fulfilled. So during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first fruit, the first grain is presented, and then we should be a kind of first fruits. But here he's talking to the 12 tribes who are scattered abroad, so pointing us kind of more to these 144,000. Only Paul and a few who are with him are sent to the Gentile nations. Everybody else kept talking to Jews. And for the first 3.5 years, no Gentile converts came in, unless maybe they were converted physically, like the way you're supposed to through the conversion process. So it was just to Jews initially who were the first fruits. And here James is continuing to reach now to the scattered Jews. Maybe they're Hellenized. So he's reaching them and saying that we, James also being a Jew, are kind of first fruits of his creatures. So when you compare it to all of creation, humanity, specifically here, Jews, are the first fruits to come in. And then finally pointing to where we started with the 144,000, definitely natural born Israel, as I understand it. And all this first fruit talk, important to ask this question, are only the 144,000 protected from these locusts that come out of the pit? Because I understand that the church of Sardis has been taken out, and maybe the church of Ephesus has died off, but we have all of these other churches who are still present, as I understand it. And so I think that we can show that everybody who has joined to Messiah is part of this assembly of Ephraim. And then also, because the 144,000 haven't yet accepted Messiah, they will in the middle of this day, as I understand it. They are also sealed at the start to be grafted back in as these righteous ones of Israel. So that concludes our study for today. Thanks so much for joining, and Hashem bless you.